This is what it looks like when you're recording in VR. So to make a recording, you see where it's that little red circle there. You click that, click start. Right now I am recording, so it just says stop. This is the login screen for Roblox. So you go in, you log in using the password that your tutor will share with you, and then you'll go into Roblox and it'll look like this. So this is the main Roblox screen. It has all of the games, so you can scroll through, you can search, etc. You can use either your hands or pick up the two controllers like I just did, and then you can scroll through and see the different games. Not all of these are made for VR. Ones that are made for VR will often say, but also just because it says VR does not mean it's meant for the Meta Quest 2s. It could be a different kind of VR. And when you're in that VR space, you can customize your character. There are some free characters, you can choose different body types, you can customize it however you like. You'll be sharing these characters with other students, so likely it will change and you'll get whoever the last person made it look like, and then you can also change it as well if you so desire, but you certainly don't have to as well. So back to the games. This game is an example of one that says it's for VR, but when you actually try it out, it doesn't actually work in VR. You just kind of stand there and people just stare at you. You can't actually do anything, unfortunately. So instead, we're going to take a quick look at one of the other games, which is Cook Burgers. And there'll be a list your tutors will share with you of games that do work in VR on Roblox. So here's an example. When you go inside, you'll have that first loading screen, and that often has instructions. So here you can see the settings, etc. You can change your height, all that sort of stuff. But it also gives you the instructions on the left and the right. So on the left side, you can see which triggers do what, which buttons do what. When you're in the game, it's really easy to forget, so try your best to memorize them if you can. And you can try different gestures during that. And then on the right-hand side, you see the same controls, but for the right hand. And again, if you ever want to double check the instructions, you can go to the settings button in the bottom, which is like the 3 lines, the little hamburger menu, and you can check what the instructions are there. Often though, they just leave that as like the default VR settings, not necessarily the ones that are specific for the game. So if you forget, often you have to just button mash until you figure out what exactly you want it to do. My tip for playing VR in general is if you're stuck, if you don't know what to do, just button mash. Just press all the buttons. Eventually you will figure out what the right thing is, but it might take a while, and that's perfectly normal and perfectly okay. So when you enter a game, you'll probably be tossed in kind of just in the middle. No instructions, no idea what you're doing. That's alright, that's normal. You can press buttons, you can look around. When you're in VR, you really can't break anything, so please feel free to experiment, press all of the buttons, and just do your best to figure out what you're supposed to do with it. So you can press the buttons along the bottom. There's one for full screen, which is the 2 arrows. The chat button is a little chat box. And oh look, we've made a friend. How exciting. So for this Cook Burgers game, the way that you teleport is you point and then you sort of like use the arrow to teleport by pressing one of the controller joysticks, such as you'll see me doing right there, and then you can pick stuff up. You're supposed to pick up ingredients for a burger, if I understand correctly. But honestly, I don't play these often, so who knows. But that's how you play the very basics of that game. So for entertainment purposes, here's just me messing around, trying to figure stuff out. Now, when you go into a game, there is always a purpose. The purpose of this one is to cook burgers, so it tells you put the plate first, and then do all these things. And sometimes in Roblox, you'll see people who are actually trying to play the game. For the most part, though, you'll just see folks messing around because it's more of a social platform in many ways. And especially when you're in VR, games aren't always as straightforward as when you're on desktop and you can follow instructions a little better. There's a bit more to do, a bit more to see, a bit less clarity when you're in VR. So for example, how do I throw this? Clearly, I do not know. So anyways, when you're ready to leave an experience, you look at the menu bar and you find the little exit door, and then you can just leave and try something else if you want. One thing you'll probably note is that when you're recording this, what is recorded is where you're looking, So in your goggles, you're probably seeing like a nice static screen. It's very balanced, it's not moving all over the place. But as you can see in this recorded video, when you look around, the camera follows you. So be prepared for your final video to look very, very jerky, even if you're doing your absolute best to keep it steady. It's just how it's going to be, unfortunately. So this is an example of what happens when you try a game that is not a VR setup. So here in the loading screen, I'm going to try and click one of these options. What you're going to see is that I can't click anything. I can't do anything. I am just stuck. So that's what happens when it's not built for VR, because controls are tapping based, and so there's nothing set up for the Oculus. Most of the Roblox games are created by individuals just because they enjoy it. So there are no standards, they have to make things accessible for VR, etc. So if you're lucky and it's for VR, fantastic. But in general, most things on Roblox are not, unfortunately.